The next thing I'd like to do is fix up the bug where you can potentially override an existing counter with a new one, which is obviously against the rules and not something you shouldn't be able to do. Before we go ahead and do that, however, I'd like to improve my test a little bit. I notice I'm not even using this variable at all, so what I'm going to do is change the name of this one down here to make it expected, and this is going to be the final outcome for my test, so I'm going to move that one to the top to make it obvious what is going on. Let's go ahead now and update this, and everything should still be passing if we've done everything correctly, and so it is. One thing I'd like to point out at this point is this is not really a generic tic-tac-toe implementation, this is a very specific Vue implementation, and we can tell that for a few reasons. One reason is we have the value down here. This is part of Vue's reactivity system, so we would not be able to reuse this implementation in another framework, for example React. We've tightly coupled ourselves to the Vue reactivity system, and as such we've tightly coupled ourselves to Vue. This is not necessarily a bad thing. It is of course possible to make an entirely decoupled implementation, but that's not something I'm focusing on in this particular lecture. However, it is good to be aware of these design decisions that we've made. The other thing I'd like to point out is we have this variable call or this function call here. It takes several arguments, but it doesn't return anything. And if you ever see this, you almost always know there's going to be a side effect or some mutation happening somewhere. In this case, it's intentional. We are mutating the board and we know we are, but that's just something you need to look out for. If you really like to write immutable functional styles, you very rarely see code like this because it usually means you're having a side effect, which is not something you generally do in functional programming, a topic I do enjoy talking about and something we'll be talking about more in future lectures. Anyway, let's go ahead and write our test to make sure we have something to guide us and then fix that bug. What we're going to do is make this the expected outcome here, and if I call make move again in here, this is actually going to give us the bug. We're going to override the previous counter with a new counter, and that's going to fail. So let's go ahead and fix this up, and if we fix everything up correctly, the test should be passing. So let's go up to our top file, which is our composable, and what we're going to do is now add a check in here to make sure the current cell is not taken, and if there's already a counter in the current cell, we're going to return early. So the first thing we need to do is do a check here, and that's before we insert the counter. So I'm just going to do an if check here and see if there's something in that one that's not equal to the hyphen, which is indicating an empty cell. And if that is not true, we're just going to return and do nothing at all. Let's go ahead and save this off and see what happens. The test is now passing, which is definitely a good sign. We're going to head back to the browser and make sure that's working correctly as well. So this is all working correctly, and if I click on here, nothing is going to happen. It's not going to let me move in an existing cell, which is the correct behavior and implementation.